boom, boom,
Boom, boom, boom.
boom,
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 boom.
boom.
Well,
Good morning, everybody. His name is Christopher Belly.
I'm a certified CPA accountant. I'm a long-term
Yep.
bubblehead investor. I'm author
He
of
is
the book
an author
Stop
of,
Being a Loser.
yeah.
Long-term bubblehead. And my hair is completely jacked up, and I don't care. So anyway, I have a special guest on today. His name is Sasha Yanshin. Did I pronounce your name right?
Is there an echo? Or is it just me?
I'm not getting an echo.
No, it's just me. Just me.
Technical
Ignore me.
difficulties. Anyway, Sasha, introduce yourself. Who are you?
My name is Sasha. I was born and grew up in what was back then the Soviet Union, moved to the UK, kind of studied, got my first job in a bank, stuck around, worked in finance most of my career, with a few diversions in the middle to other industries, then ran my own strategy consulting business for 7 to 8 years. I was working with banks on new product design, strategy, a lot of like merger and acquisition deals, companies acquiring other companies, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the work was valuing other businesses, primarily in the finance space, but also like some tech businesses and stuff like that. Then after about 7 to 8 years, I hated consultancy from the start. That's a whole separate topic that I can go on for a long time. I'm like a doing kind of guy, and math. I just study maths, things like that. I hate, and unfortunately, if you run your own strategy consulting firm, you have to do sales. Like that's the actual business, and I hated it. So I started doing content. So I have this finance YouTube channel. Started talking about more kind of easier topics rather than investing. So I was talking about like consumer credit. So I have a lot of experience in retail banking. So I was talking about consumer credit. I was talking like bank accounts and building your credit score and that kind of stuff. And I progressed gradually to talk about investing, because it's very, very difficult to start talking about that stuff, because like there's a lot of people who try and you just die as a channel because it's impossible to break through the noise. And I have a few other content type things that I do, like blogs and things like that. But yeah, that's what I do now. I enjoy it far more.
In the Soviet Union. So would you say you're a communist?
I wouldn't say so. No, I mean, I was born and grew up there, but not sure. I'm not sure that qualifies.
So I'm actually a little interested before we go into anything else. So, like, do you remember the Soviet Union? Can you kind of describe your life there? Was it horrible? Was it okay?
It broke apart when I was 8, 9 years old, something like that. So I guess like I remember it enough. Like not I didn't live through it as an adult, so I don't know. But it's very different. It's kind of interesting because both in the Soviet Union and in Russia, like you got to experience things like hyperinflation, extreme economic uncertainty, stuff like that, where you probably look at things slightly differently, and you probably assess like the likelihood of things turning and changing differently by having seen how firsthand things can unravel a lot more quickly than you would expect. But I don't know. It's not a different. I mean, like it's just my background. I don't know.
You're a communist, I can see. No, I
burn on the stake.
Like, what's life really like in the Soviet Union? I mean, you were kind of young, so I guess we can't really get too much in depth about that.
Yeah, I mean, we had like 4 channels on TV. As a kid, all the photos I have are black and white. We didn't have color photo.
Really?
So there are things where it was a little bit behind on times. I think our music, like the popular Western music that made it across, was probably about 10 to 15 years out of date. Just that kind of stuff.
Dang, that's crazy. Okay, so you moved to the West, the free world. Now, tell me more about your business that you started. Like, apparently you're like a big hotshot businessman.
Not a big help. It was a boutique kind of consulting firm. So I think we were only about 20, 25 people running out of a London office. And then I moved to New York for about a year, opening a second office over there. It was just a consultancy where we primarily did 2 types of work. We either launched new businesses for banks, or we worked with like private equity firms or banks or other companies on mergers and acquisition deals. So that's probably where like I kind of got my taste proper. So I did a couple of big transactional deals when I was working before starting my own consulting firm. But I was doing a lot of these, like some really big acquisitions in the US. where we kind of get hired to do the valuation of the business. That's probably where I kind of got my taste for how I approach doing this kind of stuff. And it's like a little bit different maybe to what other people do, and maybe it's not right in some other people's eyes, but the launch stuff is probably where we did, I'd say, I don't know, 60% of our work. And that was kind of, a bank says, hey, we want to start a retail banking operation or a credit card business in, I don't know, in the Middle East or like Hong Kong or something like that. And they don't have anything. And so we were sort of the end-to-end delivery guy. So we speak to the bank and they say, we want a credit card business. We want to target like prime customers, whatever, mid-range, etc. Go make it happen. And it's really interesting because you kind of do everything. So I've worked across different functions in retail banking, and it's like people don't really appreciate how much there is to do. So there's nothing. Imagine like there's nothing, and you have to build, like the brand, the strategy. You have to work with, how do the cards get printed? You need to get them delivered. Like when people have issues, they need to call a number. There needs to be a call center. The call center needs to have something on their computer that they go and look at. And the system needs to be able to speak to like TSYS or whichever the system to update card details. Like what are all the protocols? It's just like there's a lot of moving parts, and we just kind of got hired. So there was a lot of there was a period where we did like a huge amount of it. So you probably heard some like big international banks like HSBC, other ones, they've been launching like brand new like big current accounts in different jurisdictions around the world, credit cards, Jade, etc. There was like a lot of small projects, a lot of new startups and stuff like that. Some big UK new, like we've had a spate of new challenger banks, and we did the banking license applications for some of those in the UK. So that kind of work.
Okay, are you still involved in that, or are you just focused on
pretty much no. I've sort of switched to go full time a year and a half ago on the content. I'm telling you, I enjoy it so much more than living out of a tiny suitcase like in the random hotel in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, a lot more fun.
Yeah, I freaking hate traveling. That's why I love YouTube, because you literally just go sit in your office in your bathrobe with your hair jacked up, and you just pump out a video, and you go back downstairs. It's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I worked out of my house for 2 years. Now got a studio, which is 3 minutes from my house, which is extremely convenient.
Yeah, you're kind of a big shot now. You got your own studio. It's going to take a long time before old Strongman actually starts renting a place out.
It felt like the time. It's kind of difficult because like better than I do. I've only got one kid, a 3-year-old. But it's just like my studio before was my living room, and it's very difficult to work out of your living room when you have a 3-year-old. Like even just like, once a quarter I want to do the live coverage of the Tesla earnings call, and oh my god, like my wife would take him upstairs and try to keep him from screaming the house down. A studio makes things easier.
Yeah,
people
I
watching
definitely
videos don't appreciate it.
If I ever get as big as like some other YouTubers, I need one, because now I have 2 kids. I'm in my freaking daughter's room, so she's currently staying with us in our bedroom, in like a little bassinet. She's gonna have to move into here in a couple months, and then I'm gonna have to work in the garage or something like that. I don't know yet. So
yeah,
it's well, I'll figure it out. I'm a little stressed about it, but I'll figure it out. So let's talk about Tesla a little bit. What's your background with Tesla?
I've invested in Tesla for some time now. I've been talking about it on the channel since I kind of started talking about investing. It's one of my longer term positions. It's one of the few that I've kept, because I exited quite a few positions like a year and a half, 2 years ago, when a bunch of them hit my target price or thereabouts. So I was sitting long term in companies like Nvidia, Adobe, etc., and I don't have those positions anymore. AMD is the other one, I think, that I'm still holding because my target keeps rising over time. But with Tesla, it's a company where I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand why the valuation is what it is. A lot of people will make very strawman, kind of very basic arguments about, oh well, how many cars do they make versus Toyota or whatever. My point with them is, do you know how many Hot Wheels cars are made every single year? More than Toyota. Do
you actually know that number?
I don't know, but it's a lot. Like a few thousand of them are in my house. So with the little boy. So I think a lot of people can just go and say, well, all car companies are exactly the same. All margins are the same. All potential growth opportunities are the same. Like nobody cares for the levels of debt, the cash position, the growth from the existing like factories, the technology leaps, and the gaps there. So I kind of feel like I have a valuation which some people will say is extremely lofty. So I've had the same kind of extremely lofty valuations previously for companies who then went and hit those valuations. It's like you're not going to win all of them, and I have exited positions before where my thesis changed. But even since I started like talking on YouTube, I exited several positions where I just hit my target, closed the position, and when you're going through a downturn, it's very easy for people to go and say, well, you suck because your investments are down or whatever. And I'm sitting there going, great, everyone's investments are down. And it's very easy to point fingers because if you're invested in any form of a growth stock or an earlier stage company, a pre-profit company in some cases, like when companies are actively investing money into marketing, whatever. And it's a fine line because people will go and brush all of them with the same pain, and they kind of say, well, every company that is loss making is necessarily a bad investment, and I think like in many cases that is true. And I would completely agree. But if you dig and actually understand why it is that they're not making money and what it is that they're doing with the cash and like what that might mean for the revenue streams in the next few years, I think there's some interesting opportunities. And Tesla is one of those companies where, for me, I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, in order to justify the valuation, they need to make more cars than all the other car manufacturers put together, and they need to have robots, and they need to have whatever. Like my valuation doesn't have any like fancy spandex robots or any other stuff like that.
What?
Yeah, dude, it's crazy.
You're not valuing it correctly. Come on, man. Oh, so for reveal it, what is your price target for Tesla?
$3,200.
Oh boy,
I know, very lofty.
So I mean, like I talk about Tesla all the time, and my biggest criticism is it's not a mass market company. They can pump out a bunch of Model Ys, and they're extremely expensive, and of course the margins are going to be high. Number one, because it's a very popular, new, exciting vehicle. It's an electric car, and number two, there is a market for luxury autos. What are your concerns about Tesla's affordability, and how do you think it's going to be mass adopted by the market?
I have a number of concerns. I mean, like it's actually unusual in that I think I'm one of the only people who covers like stocks on YouTube, talks about them, but actually talks quite frequently about some of the downsides as well as upsides. I think it was only yesterday I published a video about like some issues going on with Tesla. I get occasionally a fair amount of hate for it. I have entire videos on some of my stocks where I just say, hey, let's spend an entire video just covering the downsides, because it's extremely important to be aware of the downsides of any investment that you make. If you don't think that the investments you're making have reasonable downsides or significant risks, you probably haven't done enough research. And with Tesla, affordability is definitely one. And at the moment, this doesn't seem to be a limiting factor. It doesn't seem to be much of a bottleneck because the demand seems to be at the moment, despite the ramp up in production, still outpace the supply by quite a factor. So in the last quarterly report, they had average global supply at the end of the quarter of 3 days of inventory, which is like ridiculous. As in the weight that they've stopped taking orders in several jurisdictions. Depending on where you are, it's like 6 to 12 month wait to get a new car. So at the moment, it is not a bottleneck. It definitely would become a bottleneck as they scale from the 1.5 million-ish run rate that they're currently on, which is what they're producing at the moment. If you exclude the temporary Shanghai shutdown, but as they scale to sort of 3-5 million, they'll definitely need to begin doing something in that space. And I think it's inevitable, despite what they say, that a Model 2 will come. There's also a secondary factor, and I think this is really important because just like 20 years ago, people would say, hey, like who would pay $1,000 for a mobile phone, for a cell phone? I think people value utility and the extra functionality, the ease of use, the benefits it brings, and being able to get to places a lot more easily, a lot more safely, potentially in some people's opinions, a lot more comfortably. It's like today, there are lots of people who buy iPhones And you can buy a phone that does kind of all the same stuff for a fraction of the price, for like $200 or $150, right? It'll do all the same apps. You'll be able to go on Twitter on it and whatever. You'll be able to make phone calls. But people still go and buy them because people like there is enough. And I agree with you that at the moment, and if Tesla continue along that journey, they are going to be in a premium segment. But that premium segment globally is still reasonably big enough. Like Apple's gone from being 100% of the new smartphone market in 2007 to only whatever it is, 14 to 18%, depending on which report it is that you believe and how you count them. But 14 to 18% of the total is still a lot, right? So, if Tesla get to 14 to 18% of the total car market in 10 to 15, 20 years, that is still insane because the global car market is 80 million cars a year. My model only has them at 10 million production in 10 years' time. So, like I think it's going to take a lot of work. I think it's like a reasonable best case estimate on average. I don't know. My take.
Yeah, because like people compare it to like the iPhone, which is fine. That is a premium product. And I actually have one. I actually get hand-me-downs from my parents because I would never buy an iPhone for $1,000. But with an iPhone, even a poor person could afford an iPhone. Maybe if you save for a couple months, you can go buy one, or you can do a payment plan where you sign up for the mobile carrier. With a Tesla, at some point, it's just hard for. Even if somebody really, really wants one and is willing to pay more.
That's a good point. Because at the moment, you're talking like $50,000, $60,000 entry price for the Model Ys. And I think that they won't be able to scale to any significant volume. If a lot of people are saying they're going to be making 20 million cars, whatever, it's impossible to scale to that sort of level while producing these kind of cars. And I think it is inevitable that down the road, they will have to go and produce cars that are cheaper. And I think if you take a step back and you kind of zoom out, they are moving that direction regardless of what they say, because they started off with the high ticket, high margin Model S and gradually moved down. So the Model X kind of roughly the same, and Model 3 and the Model Y. And I think over time, as they develop that, like the technology further and further, simplify the process down, get the batteries which are a bit more efficient, a bit cheaper, the structural packs which make the cars easier to produce, gigapress, etc. They will move to whatever the more compact version car is going to be. They'll have to if they want to capture that market. I think it's going to take. I think a lot of the futuristic developments in the company are going to take a lot longer than people think. I think there's this kind of expectation that like next year we're going to be producing these humanoid robots that are going to put everyone out of work and stuff. And I'm not quite sharing that level of enthusiasm. But yeah, I think they will move there. I think just like with everything in technology, I think once FSD is a lot more production ready and accessible, and at the moment 100,000 people have the beta version, and I think that if you look at the progress just over the last 6 months, I think we're not like a decade away. I think we're probably not 3 months away, but I think it's going to come. And I think once these kind of new features which add real utility to the car, where people will potentially pay, I don't know, $25,000 or $30,000 instead of $20,000 for a car or something like that. Like once that extra utility comes, where they'll be able to attract more people, even though they maybe are going to be selling at a higher ticket price than like what the competitors are selling at. I think that's when they'll push into the cheaper segments. That's my assumption.
Yeah, I mean, so aren't you a little concerned that as of right now, there's too much priced in for Tesla? Like basically, it's priced in for perfection. Basically, all this stuff works out. Tesla produces a cheaper model, takes over a huge part of the car market. Wouldn't it be better to just at least wait until the stock, potentially crashes and then buy in at that point?
Well, yes and no. So I don't try to wait and time the market on any investment. I don't try to like if I see an upside where my valuation, my target price is significantly higher than where the price is today, I don't try to sit in there. I don't go to a supermarket and see chocolate bars. The example I give in some of my videos, and chocolate bars on sale, it's like selling for 40 cents instead of $1. I don't go and say, nah, I'm not gonna, because tomorrow it could be 35 cents. I just think it's a great deal. I'm going to get it. And I apply many of the same principles I think that you advocate, which is just continuous investing over time. Price goes up, I invest. Price goes down, I invest. My average just follows whatever it happens to be. And I invest just while I see an upside in the company. When the upside squeezes, I stop investing. I'll sell when I feel I've collected everything that I've got to collect. but in terms of my valuation, if I exclude everything else, so if I exclude, so energy is another like big component because they've been putting all the batteries into cars and sort of mothballed energy for the last 2 years, pretty much. The Nevada and Buffalo business, so they've got big factories there. But if I delete everything in my model except for just cars, and I get to that 10 million car run rate, and my assumptions that like my price goes up at, I think, less than inflation at the moment on the cars over time. It's not particularly aggressive in my opinion. Like, sure, it's aggressive to go from 1.5 million run rate to 10 million run rate in 10 years. Like, it'll take some work, but I don't think it's unreasonable. And that valuation gives me about $1,800 with nothing that everyone else says is worth trillions or whatever. And I'm pretty happy with that because like I kind of feel like even without everything else, my fair value is higher than what the current share price. That's it. And Tesla's just one of the many companies. Like I invest in a small number of companies. I'm not the sort of one company, put all my chips into the same. I never understand that kind of theory because people say, well, name me a better investment than Tesla or whatever. That's a common thesis. Like it's the best company. And I'm looking going, just because a company is great and doing great does not mean that the stock price will do great. Because a lot of people, they kind of go and say, they measure company performance by the stock price movements. And I'm like, those two are completely separate things. I mean, like there are loose, like one influences the other, etc. But a company can be doing great, growing, but its stock price can be reducing. This is what happened to many companies in the last year or so, right? We're seeing like where they're having blowout quarters, like new record after new record, but the company is losing every quarter in terms of share price. And so for me, I'm just I don't really care for the short-term fluctuations. I'm just here to, like, over time collect my growth. That's all I need.
So you have a target price. Do you have a sell point? Like, let's say Tesla collapses for whatever, the economy goes to crap, Tesla's orders collapse. Is there a certain point, a certain stock price where you would sell it at?
Yeah. So there are two main reasons why I would sell out of any position. One is that I've collected all or most of my upside. Stock runs up for whatever reason, hits my target, I sell every single time. Unless there's a good reason, like I need to reevaluate my target. But if my target remains the same and the stock price hits it or gets very close where there isn't any more reason to be holding that position, I'll be out. But the second is if I reevaluate, and I continuously monitor all my stocks on an ongoing basis, if I reevaluate and my target price drops, I'll sell out of that position too. And that's happened before. That will happen again because you will have some winning positions where you're going to go and get 100 or 200% return, but you're going to, those get balanced out over the long period by other positions which don't come through, or the company just goes on. Like companies go on all kinds of journeys. Sometimes they're going well, and then like the management changes, something else, they get greedy, competition. Like there's a million reasons. You can't foresee everything. All you can do is play the averages over the long term. And if my evaluation of the company changes, so like my target price drops and my target price continues dropping, and then the upside squeezes and I don't see that upside anymore, or the risk profile changes where I think, the upside might still be there, but the risk profile is greater. Like, for example, like I have a very small position in Palantir. It's one of the smallest positions in my portfolio. But like the risk profile over the last year or so has increased, I think, significantly in terms of some of the headwinds facing the business, like the ability to switch from government contracts to commercial, etc. And my target price, like on that, has come down. My target price on Tesla, I revised it down from 3.3 to 3.2 in the last. Like I'm not here to say it's a $bazillion stock or whatever. I'm just like, I only make these. The beauty of doing this YouTube finance stuff is this is what I do for myself anyway. So I just share my opinion, and it's like what I say is just what I actually have done for myself. So I just do this stuff for myself to try to assess like what I should do with investments, and I just share my opinion with other people. If other people find it useful, great. If they don't, there's plenty of other sources of information. I'm not here to shill anything. And I am sure many people will accuse me of shilling stocks or whatever. I never once in my video say the words like you should buy something or you should do something. In a typical valuation video, I'll explain some stuff about the company, walk through some interesting insight and analysis, show my model, walk through like, here is like how I think about these things. Here are the risks. Here are like potential upsides, etc. I'll share the valuation. I'll say, here is what I think a fair target value is. And then I'll say what I'm doing. I never once, like in any video, say, I think you should do something. If people like, the unfortunate thing with social media and everything else is no matter how good your intentions or like you just honestly just sharing your opinion or whatever, which is completely fine. And there's nothing wrong with sharing your opinion. I don't have any problem with anyone else sharing their opinion. You're still going to get people hating you. People, there's people who get obsessed. For me, being a YouTuber is just as odd as it is to anybody else. I wasn't, I wasn't a YouTuber before. I'm not a bubbly, going out personality type guy. So I'm, for me, this is on, and I'm beginning to have this kind of thing where once you grow, you get people who are like becoming dedicated haters, which is I find really odd as a thing to do with your life, to like go on social media and spend like literally every day writing like hate comments about some person that you don't know. I find that very odd, but it's like I think it just comes with the game. But that's the thing. So I think this is where, so I've previously on 2 occasions highlighted where some other YouTubers have like offered extremely dangerous, in my opinion, advice. One when Graham Stephan and a bunch of people were promoting Flocky Inu. Back at the peak, is now about 95% down from that peak. They were actively promoting it and kind of like doing a video saying, oh, well, okay, there are a few cons, but it's great. Like he even had a guy like that Dogecoin millionaire on that video saying he's definitely going to 10x in the next 6 months. And I do not ever, so this is where we're maybe a little bit different. I don't ever take hits or kind of say, look, I think your investment advice is bad, or not like your opinion or your analysis. And I actually personally think that a lot of investment kind of talk on YouTube is really pretty bad. Like when people make anecdotal, they go to a shop like, oh, I saw one person buy this product, it's going to go to the moon or whatever, or just like there's no concern for the numbers. There's no concern for like whether the company is ever going to turn a profit and how they're going to turn a profit. But I don't really ever talk about that because people are right to have their own opinion. They're allowed to have their own opinion. I don't care. Like even if their opinion is bad, is free speech. People should be able to determine for themselves if they agree or disagree, or if the person's full of rubbish. But I point out when I think somebody is just doing something which is like genuinely, really, really bad, not in terms of like specific stock pick or something, but when the advice is dangerous, especially if people go and take it out of context. Or the other time, there was a time when me Kevin was selling all of his stocks, and at the same time made a couple of videos strongly advocating that people go and remortgage their house to the max and borrow max and all their credit to buy the dip. And I was saying, you probably shouldn't be telling people to do that. That's not good. Like that's not a good recommendation. And so it is what it is. I'm sure a lot of people will place me in exactly the same category and say that I'm just as bad. That's fine. People can have their own opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with a lot of YouTubers that talk about finance, as long as you have a responsible message. Like, hey, I really like this stock. Here's why I like it. It's a small part of my portfolio. You should not put your entire portfolio in this. And that's fine. That's fine with me. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people out there that are pumping absolute trash, and they don't have any kind of disclaimer. Now, I will say Graham Stephan is pretty good at kind of like saying, hey,
on average, I agree. Yeah. I said that much in that same video. I think like
oh, I'm going all in. Like he's mostly in index funds. Everybody freaking knows.
Oh, I agree. The message overall, I think like if you're going to watch a big channel, his is a great channel to watch. Like especially if you're a beginner investor or just want to manage your finances sensibly. It was just that one it seemed so out of character to go and suddenly be pumping like weird dog meme tokens and stuff. Which made it even worse, I think, because a lot of people probably would place more trust in his content on average than maybe some of the others. I don't know.
Do you have any positions in cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin?
Not at the moment. I held a very small position in Bitcoin at one point, but I do not at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure if you watch my videos, I freaking hate cryptocurrency. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or Floki, it's all trash to me.
It's one where I really love the mathematical concept and what it may bring and the theory behind it. I think there are potentially really fantastic applications in the long term. It's just one of those where, when the internet first turned up and like the implications are great, but at the beginning, everyone's just using it for all the wrong reasons.
They still are.
But it's kind of like the same here, where I think like the ability to have a fully decentralized ledger, the ability to be able to have a tamper-proof way of storing public like records of whatever it is that you want and other stuff, it's pretty innovative and pretty interesting. But I think like sort of inventing the latest dog meme token that serves nothing, offers nothing, like solves no issues, provides no solutions, it doesn't do anything. And like I think it's very odd that we have this culture now where it is perfectly acceptable for people to have a thesis where they invest in something where the only reason that you invest in something is because you think hype might drive the price further. Like, when I make an investment, generally speaking, I am relatively happy to keep that investment for the next 30 years because like I'm a part owner of the business. I'm buying the future cash flows. And the expectation when you're doing that is that you're buying more than $1 worth of future cash flows discounted in $1 today, right? And so I'm sort of like buying those dollars. I don't like in the theory, like, and I know it doesn't work that way because companies take a long time, sometimes very long time to start paying dividends, etc. I get it. But the theory is kind of like I'm buying into that cash flow of the future. Whereas with this, like there is no utility, there is no reason why like that thing will earn you any money ever, other than it's just driven by pure hype. And it's just so odd how the regulators seem to be impotent in regulating it. There is very little interest. And I find it bizarre because there are like lots of young people who are just being set up for life with entirely the wrong message in how to think about money and finance. And like, isn't this your whole job to regulate? Like, and they're like, oh well, crypto is outside of our control. And I'm sitting there going, like, make it inside. Like, you are literally, you have the regulators, you have the Senate people. Like, just pass the right laws. Like, do something.
Yeah, I'm super disappointed in my government. Like, I know China banned cryptocurrency, which I think is an amazing thing. But looking at the United States, it's getting so bad. Like, I actually did a video where I had like a bot commenting on my channel, and I decided to text the bot on WhatsApp. Yeah. And of course, it takes me directly to a freaking altcoin website where they're saying, well, if you give me this much money, well, we'll give you 20% returns. So I had a joke. I was like, okay, I'll give you $100,000. And they're like, yeah, just send it over, and we'll get you 100% returns in a couple of days. I mean, that is so obviously a scam, and it so obviously needs regulation. It blows my mind because we created the Securities and Exchange Commission in the 1930s, and the whole purpose was to protect the investment public. And our government's doing nothing about it whatsoever. I don't understand.
Completely agree. I think it's strange. I'm hoping that it will change because I think like the mentality of a whole generation seems to be forming in a very, very odd way. People like in my comments, my YouTube videos, that like aside from the spam, people are like, what are you targeting 20 to 30% returns? You suck, man. I'm like, yeah, that's if everything goes perfectly well. The likelihood is I probably won't be. And the thing is, like, I'm an active investor. I only have a relatively small proportion of my total. At the moment, it's a bit below 10%, but I tried to target about 10%. I'm very, very low, but in almost like in a huge number of my videos, when I reference it, when I talk about it, I kind of say that most people should not be doing it because the likelihood is like, if you go and look at some of these studies, the S&P 500, etc. studies, Standard & Poor's, where 95% of actively managed funds lose to the stock market when you're talking broad cap. So what do you think you're going to do as a retail investor without the armies of analysts, computers, and everything else, right? I do it because, like it's my choice, my personal choice. But I wouldn't I don't ever advocate that other people follow the same thing. In fact, I probably more often than not say the exact opposite. But
No, but it is tough to grow a YouTube channel if you don't talk about individual stocks.
I
learned that very quickly.
I agree with you. It's very, very difficult. There's only like one example really with the plain bagel of doing really, really quite well and actually not going down that path. But you kind of have to talk about some popular stocks, I guess, if you're gonna grow, because YouTube is a discovery platform and the discovery is led by the people watching. So you kind of have to pander a little bit to whatever people are actually wanting to watch. And so I do something a little bit similar to what you do, and a lot of people will take offense at it, but I'll go and look at what the popular message of the day is, and it's like, all the big YouTubers are like, oh my God, like the sort of hold your head like, you're just about to explode and say, oh, the stock market is crashing. Yeah, the end of the world. And so I just do exactly the same, but I produce a very different message within the video, because if I don't do that, nobody will watch the video.
Yeah, that's kind of how I develop my strategy. It's I can talk about
the intent is to try to get through to the same people with an alternative message, which is maybe a little bit more measured and maybe provides a bit more of a, like, I don't know, rounded opinion. Like, people will probably still disagree, but just me sharing my own thoughts. That's how I do it.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier about this generation expecting like massive returns, that is totally the result of Robinhood and the recent bull market. So I'm actually praying that we have utter destruction in the stock market and crypto market, because that's all it's going to take to really, train these people and to show them, hey, stocks don't always go up 100% every.
Exactly. And people got so used to it because we had the second biggest bull run, if you look at it like over a long period of time, since the late 1990s, where we had like a crazy run. And people got so accustomed, because so many of the retail investors only for the first time opened their first accounts in like 2020, 2021 with the pandemic. And just it seemed to be a few things coincided where a bunch of these new platforms turned up for the first time around then in the UK and the US. Lots of these new apps opened up, and the pandemic happened, and people kind of began watching YouTube, and suddenly like finance became a bit more fashionable and interesting on YouTube for whatever reason. And so a lot of these people, you could invest in anything and it went up. And I'm not old, maybe by some people's standards. I feel like I'm older, quite a lot older than the average investor, it seems. So yeah, I've seen, like, I worked in a bank the last time during the financial crash. Like I was sitting there when our share price collapsed like by a factor of 20. So I've seen it happen. It was in Capital One. It was my first job out of university, so I wasn't in a position to go and take advantage. Luckily, I'm in a bit more of a position to take advantage this time, because I'm sitting here going, my investment horizon is 10, 20 years time. I'm looking at like so if there is a stock that I thought was good value like 6 months ago, and people make all kinds of like, Sasha, you said this was a good investment, and 3 months later the price dropped. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't care. Like, it's the market does what the market does. And the earlier stage the growth stock, the earlier stage the company, the more it will drop relative to the average. So if the average drops 17, 20%, if you're in that kind of company, it's going to drop 70 to 80%. That's how it goes. Like the more mature, the super stable ones will maybe stay flat or even increase. That's how you get the average of minus 20, right? And I'm saying, well, for me, this is just great. It just means like when I'm looking at my long-term horizon, it just means I can be buying the same stuff at like 50, 70% discount instead. Great. So what, like, what's the, like people treat it as though it's a bad thing. And the thing is, not all of them will recover. In fact, many of them probably will not. But if you're working on the thesis that your investment picks are good, like the companies you're investing in are good, then a drop in the share price, like what we're seeing during a relatively rare market downturn, is a good thing. If you're not investing in the right company, so if the company you're investing in does not recover, then you suck anyway. Like it doesn't matter that there's a market downturn. You shouldn't have invested in the first place. Like, you've lost anyway.
Yeah, but it's really hard to get through to people because a lot of people don't have the educational tools to understand like discounting future cash flows. So when they go on YouTube, they literally just say, hey, did this go up or down? That's all they care about. And it frustrates me because, like, let's say I buy a stock that I think has a great future, great cash flows, growing cash flows, highly profitable, and the stock drops for whatever reason in the short term. Well, that stock's just as bad as Tattooed Chef because it also
exactly because you have a position in Baba, right? And Baba drops because there's like I don't invest in I don't have positions in Chinese stocks at the moment, and I haven't for the last year and a half. I talked about it very briefly in my channel. Like I don't like the ADR system. Not like I think the risk is low, but I don't like having known risks of things going to zero, which are not related to company fundamentals. And China goes and passes a new law tomorrow, does something with Hong Kong, and bang, my stocks go to zero. Like I know the chances are small. I just don't like having a known risk like that. But yeah, I completely get it. People will be looking at you saying, "Hey, you've got a position in Barber, and Barber's down, whatever it is, 70%. I don't know what it is. I don't have a position, but it's just the same. But I have positions in companies which many people will attribute to the sort of the Cathy Wood block or the whatever. And it's a bit frustrating because I think people kind of look at every single company in exactly the same way. They kind of think, well, just if there is a portfolio of 50 companies that an investment manager you disagree with has, I don't think it necessarily follows that every single one of them is necessarily a bad company. In fact, there'll probably be some good ones. It would be extremely, extremely unlikely that however bad an investment manager is, that they pick every losing stock. They've got to pick some that will probably do well. So it's one where I pick mine just based on my own research, and some of them are like happen to be popular stocks that everyone likes. Tesla, for example, is a position. Some of them are just boring. Like I hold a big position in Google. It doesn't make for good YouTube content. It's like boring. Nobody cares.
McDonald's stock. I just made a video about McDonald's. I got like so few views. I was like,
well, exactly. So you can't really make content very much on that. I hold some very small stocks. Like for example, I hold position in Fiverr. It's one of my bigger positions, and it's a loss-making stock. So people kind of think, oh well, another one of those, etc. I have a pretty in-depth model. I have like a pretty in-depth thesis as to why I'm investing in it. It might not play out. It's a high-risk strategy. It's a stock that is, low single-digit valuation in terms of $1 billion. Like it's very, very small as a company, high risk. But so I invest in different kind of things. Like it's not like I have to pick one or the other. But generally speaking, my investment approach is usually companies that are in a sort of sweet spot where a lot of people dislike the sweet spot. But a company that is approaching break even, so they're sort of an early stage company, but where I can look at the numbers and not just top down say, well, look, is like the margin's going like this, but actually explain why the margin's going to go positive. So I can see like they're reinvesting in the marketing. The marketing is driving these kind of cohorts. These cohorts are generating that kind of revenue quarter. So I can model that out and say, look, like I have a relatively high degree. This is the same with Tesla, where, a couple of years before they turned profitable, I was looking at it going, well, I can see where the profitability is going to come from. Shanghai factories opening up in a few months. Like nobody seems to be paying attention to what that means in terms of their ability to produce at scale and stuff like that. And they've been sinking so much cash into that factory when they didn't really even have that cash in 2018. So I was looking at that, and not all of them will play out, but I think the ones that do play out have the potential to generate reasonably high returns. A lot of people will probably think it's a very bad approach, but has worked for me. It's that kind of sweet spot where just before they get to that level of profitability where they're not investment grade, so none of the big funds or anyone else touches them. They're unprofitable, which means a lot of people automatically discard them, just kind of the stock sucks, etc. I don't like it. The price is often, not often, there's a lot of stocks out there where I look at them, and many of the ones that everyone talks about on YouTube, where I look at them and I'm looking and going, how are you guys, like, where are you seeing the numbers? Like, what are you seeing in the numbers? Like, how will this ever become profitable? I just look at it and go, I don't see it. And some of the most popular ones on YouTube, in my opinion, are in that camp. So I don't hold positions in them, but the ones that I do, it's always based on numbers. Like I never try to base my decision on something else. It's never gut feel or whatever. I buy and sell just on numbers and ignore the noise.
So how do you structure your portfolio? I mean, do you have like any index funds, or are you just 100% individual stocks? And what limitations do you place on percentages? Like or weightings? You have like 5% maximum for one stock, or like how does the whole thing work for you?
I have a small number of big positions. and a small number of small positions, and then I have about 10% in the S&P 500 on average over the long term. At the moment, my S&P has dropped a little bit, mainly because the sales have been happening, and I've been prioritizing putting money into stocks that I feel are particularly undervalued. But there's a science behind it where you don't want to have like one or two positions, which a lot of people on YouTube advocate, because say, oh, just one company, because anything can, does, right? Anything can happen. Like you're one company that is bulletproof and amazing today, something can happen tomorrow. It can be a massive scandal. They can get done by the regulators. The CEO might have an accident. Like these things do occasionally happen, and the company can go south before you know it. And you've gone 100%, and you're screwed. People don't like to think about it, but there's a risk but there's more reasons to it. And one really big reason why, that nobody really talks about on YouTube, why you shouldn't be invested in a single stock is, let's say that you have a portfolio of, say, 10 different stocks. If they all have the same upside, for example, in your opinion, you've done the modeling, you think there's the same upside, that upside will materialize at different points in time. And you can't predict when that'll happen, right? So this is the thing. People say, oh, when is your target price for? Is it 2030? Is it 2025? I'm like, I don't know. That's just my fair value for the business. Maybe it'll never reach that on the share price. Maybe it'll be next week. I don't know. But over time, things will happen. One company will go on a run before the others. And the beauty of having a portfolio with more than one position is that you can then capitalize by taking that profit, redistributing it into the others. And on average, that yields a higher return than being invested in the average company that, matures at the average position in that likelihood distribution curve, if you like, right? So if you say that on average, it will take 5 years, for example, for me to collect my upside, there's a good chance that a stock you invest in will go and collect it in 1 year for whatever reason. So that's the argument. You don't want to be invested in one or two or very few stocks. But a lot of people make this mistake, I think, especially beginner investors, where they hear about a stock and they invest in 40 different positions or 50 or 60 different positions. And the problem is, I can't keep on top of 60 different stocks. And I do this full time. Because if you're investing in a single stock, you better be on top of you're a part owner of the business. So think about it, if you were a part owner of a small business, in your local town, you better know everything that's happening in the business, every single bit of news. You want to be on top of every single announcement, read every single SEC filing. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't need to. I'm like, if you're not doing that, if you're not doing the research by listening, every quarter you need to go and read all, the PowerPoint presentations, the results that they publish, the filings with the SEC, go and listen to the 1.5-hour call or 2 hours or whatever it is. If you're not doing that, then you're just investing blind. You don't know what you're investing in. How are you going to do that with 60 stocks? Just count the numbers, 3 hours for this, 2 hours for that, build a model, adjust your model. It's impossible. So inevitably people are just investing based on gut feels or hunches or whatever. So my personal take is I usually have a sort of high single-digit number of main positions. At the moment, I think 7 or 8, and roughly the same. Sometimes a little bit less small positions as well. So I probably total about 14, 15 positions, and then I have a buffer that's sitting in an index fund.
Yeah, that's why I'm so big on index funds, because even me, I like looking at stocks, but I go to work all day, I work out, I hang out with my kids. The time that I can dedicate to actually going in depth into a stock, it's not there. It doesn't exist. So even me, somebody that's decently qualified to look at a company's financials, it's so hard to track even one stock. And then you even if your portfolio is 7 to 14, there's no way I can manage that. There's no way I could keep up with that. So that's why I'm so huge on, okay, I have one freaking index fund, VT, and then I have 1 or 2 individual stocks that I just kind of basically am gambling on.
Well, I made a video for, so I've got a small channel membership. I made a video for them yesterday where I literally said, if you're not going to be doing all of this stuff every quarter, you should not be investing in individual stocks, full stop. Because what's the point of investing blind? It's hard enough investing actively with information. It's impossible to invest actively and do all right without information. So if you're doing that, you just stop doing it. You're going to lose a lot of money.
Well, the problem is the things that I complain about, oh, don't be 100% in one stock. people are always going to do that because what happens on YouTube is there's survivorship bias. There's always someone somewhere that went 100% all in one stock, and that stock for whatever reason had a massive run, and their channel is rewarded by the YouTube algorithm and becomes dominant. So no matter what, that problem's always going to freaking be there. So it's really hard to break through to people because what people don't realize is there's thousands of other investors that went all in on a different stock that lost all their money, but those channels never grow because they look like complete.
And especially if it's a stock that's popular in the first place, like it's got a controversial founder or whatever, and that stock then also goes in a little bit of a run. That's the magic pill, right, on YouTube, where your videos are just going to collect crazy views. So yeah, that's unfortunately
I'm kind of
the way
praying
we live
Baba goes up massively so I can start, Baba grifting.
Yeah,
no, but like if it ever does, like Chinese stocks ever recover, obviously I hope they do. I at least don't want to keep preaching the message like, hey, this stock went up massively partially because I got lucky, but you should still have 95% of your money in index funds. We'll see if that message actually works, but I'm a little concerned by YouTube's algorithm. YouTube only cares about making money because obviously they get a cut of your super chats. They get a cut.
You don't say.
They get a big cut of super chats.
Yeah, well, yeah, and unfortunately, like it's like social media is, as things still in the early stages, trying to figure out how to battle that. Because just because something is popular does not mean that it is necessarily a good way to go. Because it can seem like, okay, well, free speech, blah blah blah, let people talk about what they want to talk about at the start, but it can quite quickly escalate into something that gets a lot of people into a bad place too. And it's like finding that line. I wouldn't want to work for a social media company on that front. I think it's impossible. Like, because everyone has expectations and everyone likes to point fingers and say, well, you guys got this wrong. You guys getting this wrong. It's like, oh, you're not moderating enough. You're letting hate speech through. Oh, you're moderating too much. You're cutting out people that you should be cutting out. Like, it's a tough job.
Yeah, and what happens is like there's all these competitor social media websites popping up. They're like more free speech oriented or whatever. But by the time they actually mature and get huge, they're going to have to do the same thing that all the other platforms are doing because once you get big enough, the government starts looking into you and like, hey, what are you doing? And then you start getting more attention to the press. So it's a problem that's really never going to be resolved.
Yep, unfortunately. Well, I don't know. I think it'll get better. It has been getting better.
I don't think so, but we'll see. See, like what I'm really concerned about with YouTube finance is something is going to happen where the government finally does step in. And it might even be a thing where talking about individual stocks may not be allowed. Because at the end of the day, at least in the United States, you have to be licensed to really push securities or be paid to,
I think it's difficult because there is a line where you are allowed to provide commentary, right? Like, which is why people talk about it on CNBC and whatever. You're allowed to provide your personal opinion. You're allowed to state what your target is, etc. You're not allowed to indicate what other people should do or suggest like that they take particular courses of action. Same in the UK, very similar. Not the same. Like, unlike many YouTubers, I'm actually like regulated in the UK. Like, this is like I'm an FCA authorized person. It's our version of the SEC, sort of. Not quite, but where I'm allowed to hold director positions and CEO positions. I have 2 different permissions grantings for banks and financial services. I pay like annuals, like fees to be regulated and stuff, which is I think I'm the only one in that space. But because
I wish I could do that, but I think in the US it's super expensive. I'll have to look into it.
No, but I do agree with you. I'd actually be like, I think the space should be regulated, and I think it's very strange that it isn't. I think it would add a lot if it was, because for example, like you can't go and talk about credit products in the same way that people talk about investing products, because that space is more regulated, which is kind of bizarre because like getting people into debt is bad. Yeah, I mean, like, that should be regulated. But people losing all of their life savings, that's okay. That's not a big deal.
I
find it odd that you can talk about credit only if you have specific permissions in most jurisdictions. But it's not the same with investing. I completely agree with you. It should be regulated. I would be the first to welcome regulation on that front.
Yeah, that's why if this bear market persists, and people keep losing money, they're going to lose faith in these influencers. People are going to talk to the government. I think at some point there is going to be a massive crackdown. And I'm also concerned, like, if you want to build a career as a YouTube finance person, if the regulation really increases, it's going to be harder and harder to make money. Because we all know YouTube finance pays money, but if everybody's getting cracked down on, people might see ad revenue start to decline too. So
I agree, and people need to figure out the long-term path, because I think it will happen. I think the question is more when rather than if it will happen. Because like recently there's been just this explosion of like 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds like providing investment advice and telling you how to do. I'm like, you've never ever done this yourself, like ever. You have never seen a downturn ever. You've never built a model before in your life ever. Like how are you recommending or like teaching people how to do stuff that you have no experience in doing yourself? The space should be far more regulated than it is.
We'll see. People are like, "Oh, index funds are dead." Index funds are index funds are going to take over. There's never going to be an active market. I look at this younger generation, and I'm like, dude, all these kids buy cryptos and individual stocks. This whole index fund thing taking over the market is the dumbest thing I ever heard. And I'm trying to combat that because obviously I want index funds to be prevalent. But if nothing changes with this new generation, index funds aren't going to be what people think they're going to be.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have a balance, right? Because passive investing only really works if there is some form of an active investment setup, which is not just like big funds trading against each other and competing on hedging and stuff. So there has to be a happy medium, and I think it's one of those where I'm okay with people making their own decision for active or passive investing. I think for 99% of people, if not more, they should be passively investing. And I say that all the time. But I'm also aware of the realities of life. And that, even though that is the best answer for most people won't do it. So from that perspective, I think like one thing that I can do is try to provide a bit more help to people who are going to go and do that stuff anyway, because I know they're going to do it. I do it. I know, and I know lots of other people do it, and many more people will continue to do it. So while that's happening, I don't necessarily think it's necessarily a bad thing to be kind of talking about it from a more responsible maybe perspective, in my opinion, than some other people. I know some other people will just disagree and say it's the opposite, but I try to provide a little bit more balance, maybe. That's and I don't necessarily force myself. It's just when I look at companies, I'll see something good, I'll say something good, and then I see something bad, and I'll say something bad. And people don't like that because you kind of have to be in one pool or the other. You have to be a bull or a bear. You have to be like massively pumping the stock, like rose-tinted spectacles. Nothing like you have channels that talk about a single stock, and they never not once mention a single like risk or a negative point or a downside. I'm sitting going like, what are you doing?
They're making a lot of money is what they're doing.
Well, sure, but like not like it's just fundamentally the opposite of what a sound investment approach is. Not being open to the fact that no company is perfect. So I think I'm seeing some kind of benefit in not quite the Palantir style benefit. I don't know if you saw that letter that Alex Carr published where he wrote that the war in Ukraine is great for business. Not the most politically sensitive thing to say.
I mean, it probably is, but yeah.
But I'm unfortunately kind of having a slight benefit from that because I've had the sort of mentality where, hey, things are not always going to be rosy and positive. There are going to be downturns as well as upturns. And, I was making videos back in September, October saying this inflation thing is like a real problem, especially as the rates are at zero. Nobody's wanting to increase them. And nobody cared. Everyone's like, but I think like people are beginning to kind of come to terms with the fact that, hey, this is the first time in history that we are in this position where the rate is, well, lower full stop, but lower by that much compared to the CPI. It's unprecedented. The only kind of real recent precedent is when Turkey tried to manage their inflation by dropping rates. They just set a new record in May. I think it was published yesterday. What is it? Like 70, 80%, whatever it is.
To fight inflation.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Well, their inflation went up to about 15%. I can't remember the exact numbers, so please don't quote me. I think their inflation went up to about like 15%, and they raised them. They did a Volcker style move.
They raised
raised. No.
Oh.
First they went to 20, and inflation capped and started coming down, and then they thought, now we're going to drop them really aggressively to try to continue battling inflation. And inevitably, when they did that, the obvious happened, and now inflation is at approaching 80% or hit 80%, whatever it is.
Yeah, like I'm not an economist by trade, but I know when you drop rates, it increases inflation. That's very odd.
It's just like if you study any economics textbook, right? People say, well, what's the logic? I'm like, it's just the real rate is the difference between the inflation and the Fed rate, right? And the real rate determines whether people are encouraged to go spend because they're losing money if it's just sitting around, or they're encouraged to save. And those behaviors ultimately are the fundamental like drivers of all behavioral economics. And I'm like, it's not really rocket science. It's like if you let inflation run and you don't try to tackle it, it will continue running. And people talk about transitory this, or like, hey, it's capped because it's, it went down from 8.5% to 8.3%. And I'm looking going, have you seen what's happening with the oil price and the gas price? And and I think people don't understand that inflation is a relative measure, because last year and the year before that, the spring months had really abnormal movements, because obviously when we had the first few months of COVID in April, May 2020, inflation dived down to pretty much zero. Nobody was spending. There was no demand. And then in April last year, because it's a relative measure to April before the 2020 April, inflation started going haywire. It went from 2.6% to 4.2% to 5%, and so on. And so when we're measuring this year, we're measuring versus a super sharp increase in spring last year. And so even a slight drop is, in real terms, if you're actually looking like at the long-term price growth curve, because people are looking at a curve which is actually a curve of the rate of change of something. And people look, oh, the rate of change of something is slowed down. I'm like, you do know that still means that the prices are going up, right? like it's not the curve of the price. It's not like the prices have dropped. They were 8.5% up, and now they're 8.3% up. It's just for that last month, because they were increasing so much a year ago, the rate at which they're increasing is not quite as crazy as it was last month. Still pretty crazy, the highest in 42 years or whatever. I think there's a lot of kind of really weird misunderstanding of just really basic concepts like that, which I find peculiar, especially from commentators. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to be a commentator. I mean, you could look at YouTube and see, as long as you're appealing and nice and funny, people will watch you. It doesn't matter how qualified you are. So, and that applies to the big leagues too. It's not just YouTube.
True. Yeah, not wrong there.
That's what I'm thinking. I should change my channel. Instead of being a dickhead, I should just be a really nice guy, wear a suit, comb my hair, have a nice background. Might do wonders for my channel.
Yeah, you're missing like bright orange and green hues. That usually, or purple. Purple is always good. I don't actually have any. I have just some wall lights that have this yellow color up there, but that's just lights that came with the office. Maybe I should do something like get a bit more bright green in corners and stuff.
You should put a Charmander behind you. How about that? Yeah, that's I'm sure you're referring to me, Kevin. So I hear you had some beef with me, Kevin. We have to talk about this. Okay.
I don't really have much of a beef with, again, like I've only pointed out one specific thing. Like I never discuss, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, like specific stock picks, what people do with their own portfolios, what they do with their investments. I don't care. It's kind of up to people. It's not my business. I don't care. I only take issue when I feel that people are providing extremely dangerous, like active advice that I think would like actually send people into financial despair potentially, which remortgaging your house to the max and borrowing against all your credit cards and keeping all that as cash to buy the dip. It doesn't matter what happens with the economy. That's just fundamentally extremely irresponsible advice. And sell everything. Like the moment the stock market is down 10%, sell everything into cash, max all the other cash. I'm like, even if you're doing it yourself, if you feel like you can't, like you earn millions every month, you're not going to be out on the street. You're not going to lose your house. do not openly advocate it. And it wasn't like, let's have a discussion about it. It was just like, you should do this. And I even played the clips of that. I'm like, you should not be saying that.
Well, because I remember he like specifically mentioned you as somebody that he didn't want to interview with, and I don't know if there was something going on there or what, but I got the impression that he was like, worried you were just gonna rip him apart if he came on your channel or you went on his.
Well, I think I don't really. I've never asked. I don't want to be on it. Like I don't have any issue with me, Kevin. I actually think the guy is like amazing at what he does. Right? Like this is the thing. Like you can have a problem with a particular point of view or something that somebody said, but not have any issue with the person. I don't have any issue with me, Kevin. I have an issue with a particular thing because I felt that a lot of people could be in trouble. But it's probably like one of the best YouTubers out there. Like he can produce information filled, you could argue whether you think it's high quality, not high quality, whatever, but he can produce like 6, 7, 8 videos a day, plus all the member stuff that he does, manages his Discord, whatever. And I know there's probably some kind of team behind it, but the guy's great at YouTube. The hardworking, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, he pumps out content that people want to watch. It's his prerogative as to the topics. Maybe I wouldn't put out the same kind of topics, but we don't all have to be the same. Yeah, I don't have a beef with him, or like I don't really have many beefs with people at all. It's just if I very rarely mention any other YouTubers or say anything about them. I only just reference when there was like this one particular point. That's it.
Yeah, so one thing that shocked me, so he actually gave me free access to his course. I was like, you know what, I'll make a video and we'll see if he actually does it. And he did. And it's shocking to me going through his material. He's actually like super reasonable in what he's teaching. There's some things that I disagree with, obviously, which I'll be making videos about that. But in general, he's like giving you a very responsible message in his course. And then you juxtapose that to what he's doing on his YouTube channel. It's like, holy crap, man, this is crazy. So he's a very interesting character.
But I actually think it's kind of interesting because I actually think that I don't know if this is intentional or whatever. I actually think he's been moving in a better direction recently. So he's covering more news kind of topics, and he stopped doing he sometimes still doesn't, but like he stopped doing the market open, market close, the sort of like tradery type stuff as much. I don't know. I think like seems good to me. I don't know.
You trying to be nice to him so you can get him on
your channel? No, I think he dislikes me for pointing out what I just pointed out. I don't have any. I've never reached out to him or spoken to him.
I can see you guys becoming lovers at some point, like.
No. I don't have any issues with like any other creators really, other than like one or two in the UK. In the UK, we have a few creators who are. Who engage in nefarious practices, like being paid to, recommend things without disclosing, like being paid by small caps, being paid by brokers and actively pushing them without disclosing, or stuff like that. But that's kind of water under the bridge. Like I've kind of long stopped really talking to it.
In the UK, like if you get compensated to talk about a crappy microcap stock, I mean, as long as you disclose it, is that okay? Is that
no. So like with a broker or something like that, it's just an advertising issue, right? With the stock, it's illegal, full stop. It's against FTC rules as well. Like you can't legally be paid to promote a stock, full stop, regardless, right? But yeah, people do it anyway with microcaps, unfortunately. So if you see that kind of content, when some company that nobody's ever heard of suddenly has one or two YouTubers pumping it, just be very careful.
I actually saw a stock. It was called AP Golf, Apollo Gold and Silver. It was literally like 10 to 15 YouTubers, and they all dropped a video on the same freaking day. It was basically a coordinated.
I get these emails quite frequently, disturbingly frequently, about pumping a stock. And I'm like, what? This is so bad. This is so wrong.
You get NFT emails and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. Like dozens upon dozens, like every day.
Yeah, I get like one or two a day. I try to block them, but like they always seem to find a way to freaking.
It's impossible, yeah.
Good stuff. All right, let's see if the audience has any comments.
I'm sure there are plenty of colorful ones.
I want to find some haters out there.
Oh, isn't that everyone?
Yeah. That's my channel. Everybody hates me. Okay. Let's see. Jeremy is a bussy boy. Is there anything about Sasha? Sasha is smoking crack grifter. Do you smoke crack, Sasha?
No, I don't. But I'm definitely a grifter on, like grifting on hard on YouTube. Stealing small channels audience.
Do you have a course or do you just have like a Discord? Like,
I have a Discord. I'm actually working. I've been working on a course for like 6 or 7 months and made no progress because I've been just prioritizing YouTube and others. Like I feel like a good course with good quality information. Like I was planning to make more of an analytical course, like how to build models. I have a mathsy professional kind of background, how to actually do valuations, how to structure, like understand, income statements, balance sheets better, etc., etc. Like a course just that actually teaches more of an academic kind of course that gives people the tools so they can do the fishing rather than tell them exactly what they need to do, which stock to buy. I think education is fine if it's responsible and offers actual value that people like feel is good for them. So at some point in the distant future, I'll probably do one if I get around to it.
Yeah, courses are no joke. I mean, I would have to be a full-time YouTuber to even consider doing a course because I have to make my videos. And
I'm prioritizing the free stuff because I feel like that's the core. So whenever some time frees up, maybe I'll look at that.
Okay, so people have been asking about your Palantir investments. How much you got in Palantir?
It's the smallest of my major positions at the moment, and my target is like still like very high compared to current price. But the risk profile around the stock has definitely increased significantly. I think I have a whole video actually for anyone who like really dislikes me. Go and look at my channel and just look at Palantir. I have a whole video where I spend 15-20 minutes just discussing all the risks and all the things I don't like about Palantir. So feel free to check that out. But there's a number of risks. There's a risk in terms of, and I think that, like with many of these kind of companies, the risks are not necessarily what everyone talks about. Like I'm not necessarily like, I don't really care too much about the perceived share dilution where people are exercising a 10-year option plan that's already been in place for 3 years or whatever. Like, I don't really care about that kind of thing. It's not exactly news, and it's not real dilution because I always account for all the outstanding options, warrants, RSUs, etc. Anyway. But with Palantir, I think one of their biggest issues is the speed at which they're able to diversify their technology and the usability. So when you have a really large integration with a government organization, sure, you can do that on a particular level. But if you're going to be targeting enterprises, in particular, if you ever go down the small and medium enterprise route, which is where they'll have to go if they want to make like the real big money with their software, I'm not sure they're in a place where it is so easy to use and so accessible that they're anywhere close to being able to target those customers. And sure, like having a few big government contracts, U.S. military contracts is great, but the company is priced on growth, which goes far beyond that.
Well, it's a very intriguing company. Like I'm very interested in watching the stock and potentially buying it at some point. And they actually have some really encouraging signs. Like they're growing their commercial revenue, I believe, way faster than government revenue now. So there's a lot of potential in that company. It's just right now. I mean, you said you don't care about the share dilution. I'm huge on share dilution because I look at it. I'm like, okay, this company has a certain amount of revenue growth, and this is a test I always use for growth companies. They have a certain amount of revenue growth. Is the revenue per share growing nearly as fast? Usually, it's no with companies like this. So I would rather wait for Palantir. Hopefully, it gets freaking wrecked down to like $2. And then I can.
Yeah, I've not been adding to my position for I don't know how long, quite a while, several quarters now. I know they only went public in whenever it was like Q3 2020, I think. But yeah, I've not been adding, just like not necessarily, well, partly because of the risk profile, but mostly because I'm just seeing better opportunities elsewhere at the moment.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of opportunities like Tattooed Chef, Smile Direct. Have you looked into Tattooed Chef at all, or do you just
I've looked at the stock. I've looked at all the popular stocks that everyone's pushing. The sort of like Arrivals and everything else. Like all of those. Like there's so many of them. Like all the ones that everyone talks about. And with most of them, like Virgin Galactic, etc., like really popular, and I'm looking at going, I don't understand. Like maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm wrong. And the thing is, many times many times you will not invest in stuff, but then it will turn out to be great. That's with investing. Everyone thinks that you need to be an absolute winner, where like you either win or you lose. And that's not the game that we're playing in investing. I think most people don't necessarily understand that. Like I'm not I don't need to be 300% a year. I don't need to be a bazillionaire or whatever. I'm just trying to, like, if I get 20% a year return in the long term, I'd be ecstatic.
I mean, even if you only beat the market by 1 or 2 percentage points, that's
exactly
massive. That is huge.
Exactly.
You'll be much wealthier than other people, or you'll be set for retirement.
Exactly. And I think most people are either in the camp, 20% that sucks, like you absolutely suck, or people say, oh, yeah, it's just, yeah. So that's where I'm targeting, and like so it's maybe a little bit boring for many of the people who are investing in these stocks, because I get these comments like, oh, the stock that you invested in like 6 months ago is down. I'm like, so where like last year I made like profits on other companies. This year I take a loss. It's like, look at the stock market. The stock market returns 10% on average every year, but it is extremely rare for it to actually return 10%. I think I was looking back, I think like in the last 50, 60 years, it's only happened like a tiny handful of times.
Yeah,
so it typically returns plus
down.
20 or plus 30 or minus 10 or whatever, right? And I think it's the same with companies. It's like some years you're going to have big ups, some years you're going to have big downs. Like I'm not here to try to trade and quickly make a fortune. That's not the objective.
Yeah, but one thing I do is I never judge a company based on stock price. It's always the fundamental business. Is it trash or is it not? I've seen stocks that have mooned, gone up massively, and I'll call it out because I think it's a bubble or the business is trash. But if a stock just keeps going down and down and down, but the business is great, I'm 100% behind it. But a lot of people, they don't understand that. They want their quick 10x so they can retire at 19 years old. What about this comment right here?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I minced my words. I'm saying like the risk profile being like, what I was trying to say is like my risk assessment of the business now carries more risk than it did before. There are new risks. Some of the existing risks have substantiated, become worse, in my opinion. And whenever you're doing valuation, it's a mix of two things, right? It's like a target price or some kind of range of distribution, depending on how you approach it. Different people do things differently. But then you have to have some kind of like understanding of what your expected volatility around that projection is as well. So there are some companies where you might not have a very exciting upside, but your expectation is it's such a robust and boring business, like a Coca-Cola or whatever. Like you kind of know what it's going to do next year.
Yeah.
So and it's really important. It's the one thing that most people miss and don't really. It's not a very popular topic on YouTube, but it's really important to kind of be aware that just because you have an upside, an upside is great, but if the volatility and the risk, especially if the spectrum of outcomes means that there's a substantial risk of loss as well, rather than just a lower gain, right? Then you should be a bit more careful. How much
lower can Palantir go, though?
Oh, stocks never go to zero.
That's true. All right, so we kind of ran out of comments. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or anything else you want to?
No,
tell
I mean,
amazing fans.
But best of luck with your channel, because I'm a little bit addicted. If I'm completely honest, I don't know why.
Chest hair? What is it?
It might be. It might be the that noise. Might be the baby in the background occasionally.
Come on, man. Come on. Yeah, people either love me or hate me, man. Like I've noticed a lot of people's wives freaking hate me. The guys love me. I have like 98% male viewership. I don't know what yours is, but
all investing content it's ridiculously male skewed.
Yeah.
But my audience seems to be a bit older than the average finance YouTube audience, which is good. I think maybe
like 60-year-olds watching.
No, just I have a very large proportion in the 35 to 40, like the sort of like the mid age brackets, and it's not so much like the younger ones. I actually have like quite a lot in them. Like I've got more of a bell curve, and I think it's maybe because the content is like my titles and my thumbnails are a little bit out there, but the actual content is maybe a bit less so than some others. And yeah, I think maybe some people who are a bit older prefer that. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think mine's kind of the same way. I mean, I have some younger people I've noticed because, you know, I act like a clown a lot of the time, so they find that entertaining. But yeah, I would say it's probably more people in the 30s that watch my channel. So, all right, man. Anything else?
All right. No, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Chris.
I had fun. It was a good conversation.
This is going to be one of those like, look what I did on YouTube 5 years ago when I only had 6,000 subs before I got my million plaque or whatever it is.
Oh, please. One day. All right, man. Well, you have a wonderful day, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.